Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Never in doubt, eh? Wow. There was one point I asked someone towards the end of the first half last night in Coventry whether they were going to pop down at half time just to get a hot drink or something. And they replied, I'm not going to say who it was, but they replied, I might just go down and see if there's 2 spoons so that I can gouge my eyes out and not have to watch another half of that. Which pretty much was very brutally graphic, but summed up exactly what that game was like. That was just awful. It was awful, but somehow Spurs are through in the Carabao Cup. There's a certain irony to the fact that Spurs have played reasonably well in their 4 Premier League games so far. We can talk about various bits and pieces of performances, but on the whole, reasonably well. Yet they haven't got the results they deserved. And then they go to Championship side Coventry on a Wednesday night, stunk the place out. Honestly, the entire area just stank of dreadful Spursiness. Yet come away with a completely undeserved last-gasp win. Unbelievable the way football works. It is a ridiculous game. It really is. A single moment could just transform anything. This is why, we kind of love it and hate it in equal measure, because anything can just turn on a sixpence within a second. Postecoglou was 3 minutes of normal time away, really, from having everything ripped apart and looked at. The team selection absolutely slated, his methods, his tactics, the whole statement a few days ago, and kind of talking again about the second season silverware when asked about it. He was going to be mocked. You just knew there were going to be videos across the internet showing that and people taking the mickey out of him. Yet 2 goals within 4 minutes, right at the end of the game, is the difference in football. It's the ridiculous thing. Yeah, of course, there's still going to be question marks about various things, and we'll talk about that in this video. But ultimately, Spurs will now play 2 rounds further in the Carabao Cup than they did last year. Yeah, no, technically one is because they started a bit later, but these slim margins, they went out last year on penalties to Fulham with loads of changes in the team. 1 change less this time around, and they stayed in with the narrowest of margins. The way it's turned around, 2 players lacking maybe in a bit of confidence or their belief within the system in terms of Djed Spence, they come away as match winners. The whole risk with the team selection, which, you're still probably going to go as, that was a bit nervy. Now, with the result, Postecoglou comes away with not only the victory and going through in the cup, but he's got Romero, Van der Ven, Porro, Vicario all completely fresh. Sonny, Maddison, Kulusevski, Udogie only played a certain amount of minutes, so they're going to be pretty fresh for the weekend. It all worked. Yet, for so much of that game, it looked like everything was going to be completely different that we're going to be talking about. And that is the strange way that football can turn in a certain moment. And it can also have a knock-on effect going forward. That is just the crazy way the game is. And I felt sorry for the one fortunate part of my work, one of the fortunate parts of my work, is that we no longer have to do traditional match reports. We do, during a game, I'll be running a live blog and things like that. I'll be doing player ratings, setting up press conference blogs, things like that. But ultimately, at the top of those, I only have to do like a mini summary of the game with an intro that kind of shows you kind of what's happened. Whereas obviously back in the day, I was having to do these long match reports on the whistle, things like that. I'll do talking points the next day and these big kind of more analytical pieces. But in the full-time thing, I did feel sorry for people that are having to write the long match reports for the final whistle, because you're having to change so much because of such a tiny amount of time in a game. And it's mad. Yeah, we just found that it just wasn't something that we do anymore. It wasn't as much of a need for it. Maybe because my audience is Spurs fans. So Spurs fans are well aware of what happened in the game. You can go a bit deeper into it and everything, of course, which is what I do with talking points and these videos and everything. But maybe for the journalists who are covering on a more national level, they're explaining to people who wouldn't have watched the game what happened. Do you see what I mean? So they have this duty to kind of do it for all the newspapers. But yeah, I did not envy them having to rip everything up and pretty much rewrite so much. there was something quite fitting as well about this kind of last gasp turn in fortunes win coming against a side managed by Mark Robins. You might be aware, if you're not, he was a former Man United striker who quite famously scored a goal. I think it was an FA Cup third round game, which essentially is widely believed to have saved Sir Alex Ferguson's job at Old Trafford when things were looking a bit iffy. I think it was a couple of seasons in. And from that moment on, United just went on this upward trajectory in 23 years of success under Alex Ferguson. And I do wonder whether Postecoglou might be seeing that perhaps Brennan Johnson is his own Mark Robins. I'm not saying that he was in danger. There was never any question that Postecoglou was in any danger yet. There's a full awareness within the club that there's this huge rebuild going on. And look, last night was one of those really ropey cup games, which comes at Spurs. Top of my head, who did we have? Middlesbrough, I remember that one. Sheffield United, I think Forest, there was one as well. Sometimes just Spurs go to teams that they're expected to beat, especially in the Cups, and they're truly horrendous. You remember the televised one, was it against Leicester? Was there a Grimsby one as well? Oh, honestly, there's been so many. So I don't think that this would have been a deciding factor in anything. And I do feel like there's this real kind of belief or understanding that there's this huge rebuild. And on a personal, measure, I can't be dealing with another big managerial changes as well. But anyway, like I say, there's never any sense that was even the case anyway. But maybe when I mean more about the whole Mark Robins thing, Brennan Johnson thing, is perhaps this is where it starts to go upwards again, and then little things like that can give a team such a belief. But make no mistake, this was probably one of the worst performances you'll ever see from a Tottenham side that ended in a victory. We've seen a lot of those. All those ones I've said before, they ended up losing. Yet somehow they have ripped this out of Coventry's hands right at the end of the game. I did kind of feel sorry for their fans. The fans were great throughout the game. At the it's not called the Rico anymore. It's called the Coventry Building Society Arena, the snappily named title. But the people I most felt sorry though for, because that's where my loyalties lie, are the travelling Tottenham fans. Other than that little experience at the end, oh my goodness, they must have been thinking, we've got most of us, because the trains were a bit tricky to get back later, so most people would have driven. So you're looking at 2 hours back, getting back in the the early hours after that. Spurs were just horrendous for long periods. It's 70% of the possession, didn't matter. 582 passes, didn't matter. They just had no idea what to do with the ball. Honestly, they just would build up, and just. Well, we spoke a little bit about this against Arsenal, but this was 100 times worse. And this was against a team, with no disrespect to Coventry, they're in the Championship, and they're not a bad side by any stretch of the imagination. They've only won one game, though, in the Championship in their first 5 so far. So, they had certain threats that Spurs had to deal with, but come on. Tottenham should be going there, even with 8 changes, and not playing like that. Not playing with that lack of... You can maybe argue behind the lack of fluency and fluidity because these players are being thrown together for the first time. And yes, this will benefit them going forward. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But come on, that was just dreadful. I was watching Jamie Donnelly playing for Orient against Brentford the night before. And so much of the stuff he was doing, I was like, now in hindsight, it's like, I know he's got to be at Orient and playing, but my goodness, he was playing so many fast, progressive passes, creative balls between the lines, setting people away. And you just kind of thought, had he started in that lineup, I think Spurs have less problem. And I know that's pinning a lot on, was he 19 years old? But I actually think he was that good against Premier League opposition in Brentford. I think he would have made a huge difference. But it is better what he's doing, I think, the loan move. But they were just so awful. They were just so awful until those final minutes when it was almost like they realised what they were meant to do. Coventry had 15 shots at goal to Spurs 9. Spurs, I don't think, had even attempted a shot at goal in the first half. There was one stat I saw that said they had and it was off target. I can't personally remember it and I could be wrong. They were just, like I say, the smell probably reached everyone in N17. It was that stinker of a performance. I suggested to Postecoglou after the game, the first question, as you know, I kind of often have to ask that because no one will do it. And I kind of asked, what do you take from that game? Do you take from the game the character shown at the end, the spirit to, snatch a victory from the jaws of defeat away from home? Or do you look at the flat performance that came before it, the really flat performance? Or is it kind of a mixture of both? And he did his kind of classic, I don't know. Flat performance is a bit harsh. I think it was a typical cup game. I thought Coventry were really good. They put some real energy into the game and we couldn't really get a grip on it. So we had to hang in there. We had to work really, really hard just to stay in the game. And obviously going a goal behind makes it even more challenging. But like you said, at the end there, we showed some real spirit and character, which is probably what's been missing in the first 4 games. We've had the performance, but we haven't had the relentlessness to get a result. But you sense in that last 10 minutes, we got real belief out of that. And hopefully that's a good sign moving forward. I agree with him that a lot of credit has to go to Coventry. Coventry were excellent. They were really good. Just didn't have that finishing touch, really, that would have probably put them out of sight. But I'm sorry, Ange. That Flat was being generous. They were rubbish. But obviously, I can't really say that at a press conference like, so your team were absolute garbage. Do you take that? You have to kind of couch it in slightly different terms. Otherwise, you just don't get an answer from managers in those situations. There was a good question. I think it was Tom Barkley from The Sun asked about his team selection, which, if you can listen back to it, it's really. I praised him afterwards, which I'm sure made no real difference to him. But I did. He phrased it in a really good way, that because there's this belief, and look, we always get this on social media, people telling us the questions we should ask, and sometimes there's subjects that are great and I hadn't thought of, and it's a really good idea. And my job is, I've always said, is to try to be your man on the inside. The Spurs fan in there trying to get the questions. But there's things that we can say as fans and questions we would want to ask. But in a press conference scenario, you've also got to understand the subject you're dealing with and whether they will shut down and you won't get the answer you're actually looking for. So it is just you saying angry words into the air. We get a lot of that. All of us get kind of questioned. Why didn't you ask that? We normally do ask exactly what you're looking for us to ask, but we do it in a different way to try to get the answer that you're looking for. But yeah, it's one of those. We've been doing this a long time. I have been a journalist for, what are we up to now? 21 years, covering the Premier League. It won't be long off. Probably 9 years now, maybe approaching that decade. So, while things sometimes you might wonder why we ask questions in a certain way, there's a reason behind it, and it is not losing access. Sometimes people come up with that on Twitter, and it just makes me just chuckle when I see it. They're scared of losing access. No, we're not. No, football clubs don't do that because of a question in a press conference. They don't. If a club were to ban someone, it would make a bigger deal than it would just having a little moan at them or something. That's all it would do. And I don't think I've ever been moaned at about a press conference question. And I've asked them some difficult ones over the years for many managers. I've always towards the end of their tenure, that there's questions. I remember at Brighton, Poch just asking them straight out, do you feel like your job's in danger now? And things like that. And then I think I was the first one to actually put that to him. And it's a difficult one because when you start putting that out there as a public kind of question, it does become even more of the narrative. And Stellini, had to ask Stellini after the Newcastle debacle and things like that. So sorry, I'm going into the whole kind of work side of things there, but yeah. So the way you ask questions is quite important in how you get it. It's the same with a long form interview rather than a press conference. If you just go to someone and say, you did this, you did that, why did you do this, and stuff like that, you're not going to get much out of them. You've got to go in a certain way to kind of extract more out of them. It's a strange job. It is. We've kind of got to sometimes say things in different ways to how we mean them in order. Sometimes you'll have a contrary manager, like Ange can be. So you've got to say something in a different way to provoke a reaction where he says what you actually know he should be saying. It's a whole other thing. But flat. They were flat. They were flatter than a pancake. They were inverted. They were not a fullback. They were horrendous. They were absolutely horrendous for long, long, long periods. But they got away with it. They did. And the irony is, the 2 goals they scored were brilliant. The 2 goals they scored were the exact kind of football that they should have been playing all game. They were both goals out of the Postecoglou playbook. They were exactly what we've come to kind of expect in his kind of football. I mean, the move for Spence's equaliser was brilliant. Honestly, watch it back if you haven't seen it a second time. So he races down the flank, suddenly stops, passes it inside to Bentancur. Bentancur picks out Maddison quite quickly. Maddison plays his terrific first-time pass between the lines to Kulusevski. Kulusevski kind of draws it back with him, as he does really well. Holds it up, sees Spence going, turns, plays a nutmeg pass through to Spence. And Spence, he does really well because he's kind of being pushed over. And as he's pushed over, gets his foot to kind of prod it past the keeper. It's a brilliant goal. Had that been not in such a rubbish game, it'd just been a Premier League game, it's probably one of those we'd be watching it back and say, oh, look at this, how it started from that point and got to the end point. What a brilliant display of Postecoglou football. And it's like, because of what it is, it's a bit like, why did you do that sooner? And that's exactly my thoughts on it. And then the winner in the 91st minute, 4 minutes on. Bentancur wins the ball back in midfield, him and Maddison kind of both pressing this guy. I can't remember who the midfielder was now for Coventry. Bentancur races up the pitch, picks out Johnson with a lovely ball. I think Johnson pace also makes it look even better, but it's in the right area, and that's the main thing. And first time, despite his confidence issues, Johnson plays this lovely little dink shot that just is perfect into the corner. And it's like, why? Why have you waited till now to do all of that? It was superb. And the whole celebrations around the winner were kind of muted. There's another reason for that, especially with Brennan Johnson, what we'll talk about. But I think just on the whole team were a bit like, yeah, we've been a bit embarrassing today. We can't exactly go wild as if we've just won the Champions League final here. We've probably got to be a bit more respectful. And they were right in front of the Coventry fans and everything. And it was just like, it was really kind of awkward. Wow, so this has happened. It was really weird, actually, because there was a journalist next to me and they were going on about, at least we don't have extra time, we're going to go straight to penalties. I just had this weird thought where I said to him, I don't think it's going to go to penalties. I think one of them is going to score, and obviously, as in another goal. And thankfully it was Tottenham. Not for the Coventry fans, but thankfully for Spurs. And Coventry had done really well. I don't want this to come across as like this is just all about Spurs being awful. Coventry played really, really well. Their goal was nice breakaway goal from Brandon Thomas Asante. He swept in the brilliantly named Norman Bassett. I don't know why, I just love that name, Norman Bassett. It's like such a classic. It's not spelt how it would, like a Basset hound or something, but it's just like a classic English sounding name, Norman Bassett. Sounds like some kind of the Conservative MP for Colchester or something. It was a nice goal. Funnily enough, it was Brandon Thomas Asante who, while I was typing up the Postecoglou press conference stuff, he came through the media room and was like, it was like really chipper, and he was going up to all the journalists and like even me, like patting me on the back and saying, "Oh, have a good journey home" and all that. And it was just like, you've just lost a cup tie, a really kind of devastating way of doing it. But he was very, I guess he'd been in front of cameras, he'd scored a great goal or a good goal, and I don't know, but it was just quite an amusing little moment. And Coventry had so many more opportunities. They had loads of these kind of chances where the ball was drilled across the 6-yard box, a little bit Postecoglou Spurs style, and there was just no one at the other end. It went all the way through. It was. They were unlucky. They were very unlucky, Coventry. And Brennan Johnson said after it was really difficult. There wasn't one part of us that underestimated Coventry. Me personally, Archie as well, Djed have played against Coventry a few times and we know they play good football. We were well aware of what they could bring. At times I thought we let them in too easy. We gave them too many chances to get at us, especially after they scored. We were under some real pressure, but at the end of the day, we always keep going. And he was asked about the chaotic nature of some of the performance, and he said, I think that's probably happened too many times this season for us. It's been too chaotic. Obviously, we play a certain style of football, but we gave the ball away too many times. We didn't execute the passes we wanted to make. We weren't too much of a threat on the counter-attack, especially. When we played the ball quickly, that's what it was. For most of the game, we didn't play forward enough, pass the ball and get in behind. The goals just came from quick play. That's what we want to do more often, because there's been too many games this season where we haven't done that enough. And he's spot on. He's absolutely right. It's exactly what I was saying. When they, the Spurs have just confirmed that the under-21s will enter the new National League Cup. There you go. More games for them. Yeah, interesting. Sorry, distracted there. My little tweet that came up. But yeah, as he was saying, that's exactly my thoughts as well. As soon as they started playing their kind of football, shock horror, they suddenly took a grip of the game and won it. And it's, so ponderous for so much beforehand, so many sideways passes, and so many times when a player just didn't move, didn't present an option to another teammate, and that teammate would then have to just pass the ball sideways to someone else. And I think we spoke about this after Arsenal game, and just saying like, "No, it's your turn. I don't know what to do. Have a go." Pretty much everyone was doing that, maybe bar Lucas Bergvall, and we'll talk about him in a little bit as well. But look, Postecoglou made the 8 changes from the Derby defeat. Some of them almost cost him. They really did. Again, you definitely could see the lack of cohesion, and it is these players being thrown together. And I do feel like going through this pain that they somehow made their way through, I think you can now make those changes in the next game, albeit maybe not to that degree. But they'll at least know how to play alongside each other, and they won't play the same way. They'll know what they did wrong, and they'll have the minutes in their legs to be sharper and little bits and pieces like that. But yes, some of them were atrocious. I mean, Timo Werner. He put in a performance that was so dreadful that when he went down injured in the 73rd minute, had he come off and Spurs had stayed with 10 men, I don't think you would have noticed any difference. He was that bad. He was just dreadful. And look, he might not be sharp. He definitely is lacking in confidence. You can see that. He lost the ball 3 times through poor touches. Didn't make a single key pass. Didn't make a single dribble. Didn't have a single shot at goal. His only contribution I can remember being a positive one was he made a sliding block in his own box from I can't remember if it was a shot or a cross across a low cross across the 6-yard box. But even that, he kind of looked like he was injured afterwards as well. He just offered absolutely nothing to Spurs at all. Who scored player ratings? Who scored? You might have heard me mention them before. They do stat-based ratings, so everything within a player's performance that they do. It's not always the best indicator in terms of sometimes players do stuff that the stats don't show, but in this case, I think it was quite a good one. Werner had 5.64. He was the lowest score of any starting player on the pitch. I gave him a 2 in my player ratings because he just, like I said, he pretty much got the 2 because of that sliding block. He was just dreadful, and it's one of those where I'm hoping once he gets back from whatever this injury is that he picked up, I'm hoping he finds some confidence and sharpness again, because at the moment, I think we were talking about this, a lot of us in the press box and people in the club as well. I think his loan made sense in terms of what he had done in the Postecoglou system. He had shown that he could beat his man, get to the byline, pull the ball across, and that's it. For a loan kind of squad depth deal, it kind of made sense. But if he's going to put in performances like he has so far in his little cameos this season, then of course it becomes a dreadful deal. It becomes an absolute waste of a deal. I'm hopeful, based on very little at the moment, maybe based more on what we saw last season, that if he can find his groove again, that he'll end up being a useful player in like the European games and maybe late in Premier League games. But if he's anything like he was yesterday, then I don't know whether there'll be a break clause or not in January. Often, this is just me kind of guessing. Often the clause lies with the loaning club, the club the player has come from. I think you might remember with Tongi Ondembele was it Fenerbahce last season. I'm sure they would have loved to let him go because he did nothing for them. But I think the deal was waiting on the Spurs side, and the Spurs were like, no. This is what I'm guessing. They're like, no, it's your problem. You have him. And I would imagine that's probably the case with Timo Werner, because obviously, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. We'll find out if there's anything more to that. But yeah, well, we've got to see. But for judging him on that was one of the worst performances I've seen in a long while in a Spurs shirt. And we've seen some absolute rotten ones, haven't we? To be fair, Wilson Odobert was almost as poor. Obviously, he's new. He's only 19 years old, so I don't want to go too hard on him. He's only on for 17 minutes as well. But the ball was bouncing off him. He was doing nothing with it. He had a really kind of poor thing. And then he actually picked up, it looked like a hamstring injury. I think Postecoglou said both were muscle injuries. But even his hamstring injury was because he lost the ball and then was chasing back to get it. And he kind of had this, it was almost like a bit of a collision with a Coventry player. And instantly you could see he was in a lot of pain. I asked Postecoglou afterwards about both injuries, and he said it's hard to say. Wilson's looked fairly significant, so we'll just wait and see. Timo, again, not really sure if it was just fatigue, but yeah, a bit unfortunate for both of those. Obviously, they both play in a similar position as well. We're hoping it's nothing too significant. It's just like the Postecoglou curse almost is that every player at least has to have one hamstring injury, just as they get used to what they're being asked of. It's rubbish in a way because it's kind of like it's going to happen to Bergvall at some point. It's going to happen to Gray at some point. Solanke's going to get one at some point, and it's like, do they have to? Is that really what they need to do? It's a very kind of strange thing, but it's just it is what happens at Celtic as well. Loads of the players kind of had them in the first year, and in the second year they didn't, and hopefully, although technically Timo Werner's I think would be the second one. Hopefully we'll see less of them as this year goes on. That's fingers crossed. But yeah, both wingers, and then the knock-on effect with both wingers being so poor was that Solanke was just isolated. Solanke had so little of the ball, touched it just 24 times in his 61 minutes on the pitch. I'm guessing the idea was he was only going to play an hour, but it was just it was no help to him the game whatsoever. He just barely saw the ball. No service at all. One key pass he made, one dribble he had, because that was the other issue. He was doing a little bit like we used to see Kane do when he got frustrated with the lack of service into him. He was coming deep, Solanke, and the problem was he would do something nice, he would play the winger, and they would get down the line, and there'd be no one in the box. It's almost like he needs to just stay there. But I can understand it. If the ball's never coming to you, you're naturally going to come back. But on the whole, he was just anonymous and isolated. It was not a good day for him. I've got a funny feeling we're going to see a much better version of Solanke on Sunday. Saturday. It might do Sunday, might just in his home, in his spare time. But on Saturday, I just got this funny feeling that suddenly a lot more is going to be created for him. We'll see. I could be completely wrong, but I've just got this funny feeling. But yeah, like I said, the problem for Postecoglou is that his squad needed minutes like this in order to be better for the coming European games. Because you've got 8 European games to come, and there are going to have to be a fair few changes in that because Premier League games are going to be 3 days either side. I know people love to have this saying you've got to play your strongest team. We've got to win trophies and all that. But I can't imagine. I could be wrong. Please let me know in the comments if I am. But I can't imagine people genuinely want Spurs to play their strongest possible team in the Carabao Cup and then play a weakened side in the Premier League, either in the North London derby beforehand or the Brentford game. I would be surprised. I could be wrong. And I would understand a degree of the logic behind that you might think the Carabao Cup is the best chance of silverware for Spurs, perhaps. But in reality, I don't think any manager does that. They don't. I mean, some of the squad, like the Man City squad and stuff, you can rotate and have that higher level of quality that isn't dipping kind of thing. But then maybe that is because they are rotated a lot. You get to see, they have a better fluidity together. This kind of not quite a second 11 of players, but 5 or 6, 7 players can come in and it doesn't interrupt things too much. But hopefully, the experience of this absolutely disgraceful performance, so much of it, will serve as a good lesson for them going forward. The short-term pain for us in having to watch that and our eyes pretty much bleeding as we're watching it will long time help them find some rhythm. Watching Fraser Forster out was hard work at times. He looked exactly what he is right now, is a player whose last competitive game came more than a year ago. Last competitive game was the Fulham Carabao Cup defeat. And he looked so rusty. And we mustn't forget, he was out for like, was it more than 6 months with the fractured foot as well. He pulled off a couple, I must say, first as a positive, pulled off a couple of good saves, quite important saves that kept Spurs in the game. One of them early on was from his own horrendous pass to Bergvall, which just put him in all kinds of problems. It was like, it wasn't even towards him, it was like off to the side. But the thing I noticed with him quite a lot was some of his distribution was awful, but also when he was coming to claim crosses, I think he was trying to, we spoke about this with Vicario in the Northland Derby, I think he was trying to be dominant, he was trying to claim crosses, but the amount of times he would go up, get the ball, and then fumble it as he was falling to the floor. He was lucky that most of the time there was no one around him and he was able to claim it at the second attempt, actually every time pretty much. But it was just like, it worried me so much. And the whole point of him being in the Europa League squad over Djed Spence is because of his experience and because you think he might not bring you what Vicario does in terms of the rushing out and things like that, but maybe he'd be a safer pair of hands in crosses into the box and things like that. But nights like last night, I was just like, I looked at it, I was just like, it's making it look a really dumb decision that you put him in the Europa League squad. He was that shaky for me. 36 years old now, and there was a moment when he tried to play sweeper keeper, and it was terrifying. It could have killed Radu Dragic. It was that bad. He just ran out, and it was one of those where you're like, no, don't do that, don't do that. You're not going to get there, and he still did, and he smashed into Radu Dragic. The Coventry player that was running through, Coventry had a couple of good attacking kind of pacey players that were getting through, and their play kind of fell over. Initially, it looked from everywhere like he had taken down the Coventry player, but actually watching it on the action replay, I was having to use my phone because they didn't have little screens, so I was like a minute behind watching, I think it was the Sky coverage, and so we had a whole minute of, because Coventry played, if you don't remember it, Coventry played on. Ben Davies pulled off a brilliant sliding block to stop the ball going into the goal. That I don't think enough was made of that. That was another kind of game-saving moment. But I watched it back, waited a minute because the whole crowd were going mad. But he played on. He'd played on. He's not played on. He'd played on, the referee. And then when you watched it back on the stream a minute later, he'd absolutely. I think the Coventry player was almost like, what? I was like so surprised at what happened. It was purely a collision between Forster and Dragic. It was just so clumsy and awful. And Forster was like apologising to Dragic afterwards, holding his hand up and everything. But yeah, it was not good. And it doesn't fill you a lot of confidence. I mean, European games, if he's going to play in those, it's probably going to be different, a different kind of tempo, you would imagine. But yeah, again, though, like I said, maybe he needed that to get the rust, like to blow the cobwebs out, because yeah, he was. I think I had him as a 3 in my player ranks. He was barely better than Werner, and it was only because he did make a couple of saves that were quite important. But that was not the norm for his performance. Trying to think of some positives from the starting 11. It may be more the experiences for the younger players. So Archie Gray had a really tough night. He did. He was playing at right back. He was up against a couple of really attacking players. I think old Norman Bathett was one of them down that side. And it was difficult for him. He was trying to play the inverted role and they were getting in behind quite a lot. And he wasn't getting... It was a... Dragic played well, I would say, on the whole. But he was having a tough night, having to try and cover the space as well. I think for the goal, I think Dragic is unknowingly playing Asante onside, if I remember correctly. But it is a difficult one. He wasn't really facing what was behind him. He was trying to go and get to the cross. But with Gray, he had played against Coventry twice last season as a right back, so he had experience of that. But yeah, it was difficult for him. I actually thought he was better going forward. He had a lovely run in the first half when he went past a couple of players and then or one player, and then Lewis Binks, the former Spurs under-21s player, who's had an amazing career. He's only 23. You might remember he was a very good centre-back in the Spurs Academy, and he went to, I can't remember who the owners are, but they own 2 clubs. They own Montreal and Bologna, I think it is. And he ended up playing for both. First Montreal, and then in I think it was MLS. I think they were at that level. I think they were top level, and then Bologna, and then has ended up at I think maybe even went to Como as well on loan, which is amazing. Having been there, seeing their stadium right near the lake. That's where Cesc Fabregas now, isn't it? Is taking them into Serie A. And then he's come to Coventry, and poor Archie Gray. Oh, he absolutely hacked him down. He realised that he was getting a little bit too close and took one for the team. But yeah, I'd like to see Gray get more game time in midfield. That little run and some of the touches he had and the awareness of where his teammates were with his passing, it just kind of said to me, I get that he can play right back, and I'm presuming he'll play quite a lot in the Europa League in that position, but I just want to see him as a midfielder. That's where we're going to see him as the Gerrard type for years to come for Spurs, and I want to see him develop in that role. You know, anyone that watched Leeds play against Chelsea last season in the Cup, he was just bossing hundreds of millions of pounds worth of midfield talent in the middle of the pitch, and that's where he should be playing. I wondered whether we might even see that last night with him, Bergvall and Sarr, and it didn't happen. Obviously, Bentancur came in, and thankfully at the end of the game he was there because he played a lovely pass. But yeah, it was. He spoke after the game actually, Gray. He said, it's a difficult place to come. I played here last year, and even at our ground last year, I was playing, and they always bring a tough game. Lots of transitions. That's the way they play. They did well in this game. The fans got behind them. They brought a good game to us. Credit to them, but we always knew that we had what it takes to take it right to the end. But they did very well, and I thought the game plan was executed very well as well. More impressive on the night was Lucas Bergvall. Obviously 18 years old as well. He had a bit of a shaky start. I think not helped by that Forster moment. I think almost like he felt like it was his fault, but it wasn't at all. It was Forster just played it way off to the Forster's right, and the ball ended up kind of being quite easily picked off because Bergvall was sliding trying to get the pass. It was terrible, and that kind of affected his confidence a little bit. I felt for maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes, but from that point on, his confidence quickly returned. And he was one of those, like I spoke about Donnelly earlier, was trying to play the progressive forward balls, trying to get the ball between the lines. And he was constantly wanting it, calling for it. And they were giving it to him because he was very good in tight situations, twisting and turning away from his man. I thought he played well. I think the problem for him was I think some of his teammates just weren't on the same wavelength at times. I think maybe if you put him into let's say the North London Derby starting lineup, probably it has more of an effect on the game. And these were his first significant game time of the season, really. He's come on for a couple of cameos so far. Trying to remember if he played more than 45 minutes in pre-season. Maybe against Bayern. Did he possibly in the Bayern home game? I can't remember. But this was his first real kind of game time in a full throttle Englishy kind of game, a cup tie and all of that. And I kind of understood why he was coming off. It was 61 minutes he was taken off, and the mood, the travelling Spurs fans, I understand their reaction. There were plenty of boos. They were not happy with that. But I kind of also understood it that he was tiring a bit, and I could see that in some of his work. And look, you're bringing on Madison into that and Kulusevski eventually, and they did end up being the game changers. So it kind of, again, it's one of those where in the moment I could understood the frustration, but also it kind of was proved to be right afterwards. Hindsight is of course a beautiful thing, and it was put to him. It was George Sessions from PA put to Postecoglou afterwards about that substitution and the reaction from the fans. And he said, I don't make substitutions by poll, mate. I'm sure the fans have got their own opinions, but Lucas, that's his first sort of significant game time for quite a while. What I didn't want was us pushing guys over the edge today. That's why we took Destiny off at half-time as well. We already had a couple of injuries, and I had some pretty good players on the bench that I thought could make an impact. But it doesn't take away from Lucas's performance. I thought he was outstanding tonight. They're going to play a lot of football for us and hopefully get through tonight, whether it's 90 minutes for Archie or 60, 70 minutes for Lucas. It will put them in a good space. So I get it, and I get both sides. I get why it was frustrating from the outside looking on, and he played well, but I also understand that, again, I spoke about the hamstring thing. You don't want him tiring and risking that. And, he may well get a bigger part to play on Saturday because of how well he played. And it was the subs that all made the difference, let's be honest. It's difficult. It's one of those where I don't think Postecoglou is going to get the credit for changing the game with subs, because you would understandably just say, well, they should have started anyway. But hey, that's what subs are there to do, is to change the game. And for Djed Spence, it was a big night. Like Postecoglou said, he was only going to play Destiny it was always the plan to play him for 45 minutes on the left and then bring Djed Spence in. So while I understand there was a lot of quite a bit of uproar about Djed not starting the game, especially having not been in the Europa League, the plan was always to do that. It was to Destiny to get another 45 minutes in his legs, because he had an injury that meant he only returned to pre-season late. He didn't get a pre-season, really. So these little 45-minute things are quite important for him. And I actually did feel that Destiny Doggy had quite a good first half. He looked sharper as it wore on. But the plan was always to bring Djed in. And there was a little moment I didn't see, but a few people told me, that he said apparently Postecoglou could be seen to say to Djed, get ready, you're coming on, kind of thing. But I got the sense it was always the plan anyway. But yeah, and he did get ready, and he was very good. I mean, there were a few little defensive moments where, it's going to be more difficult for him on the left-hand side. We've seen that. We saw that in some of his pre-season games where he had to play there. But it was a big night for him. It was his first goal for the club, terrific goal. Performance was on the whole really good, especially going forward. And actually, he did make a really good, crucial interception in his own box at one point as well, which probably saved the goal too. And it was a performance that, again, just makes a bit of a mockery of the decision to leave him out of the Europa League squad. He would play all 8 games, I would imagine, had he been doing that. He could have offered so much as well, but instead he'll be sitting there watching from the stands. The driving runs for me were like a highlight of the half. There were so many times he was running and got right to the edge of the box or the byline. There was just no one for him to pass to. There was no one in a good position. But it was good, I think, also for his continuing to build the trust with Postecoglou and the confidence in him. And I think he's going to benefit from more Premier League games because of this. Because there's going to be maybe some of these Europa games where Porro might play. And then Djed might be given the start in the Premier League game. It's all, it's quite important for him as well. And I'm sure there'll be injuries at Spurs, so there will be injuries. It was, I asked him, there was Djed Spence's little interview that's gone up today from the club about his scoring and all that. He said it meant a lot. It was a good feeling, especially to get the team back in the game and then the win. So yes, the goal meant a lot. The manager said just to be ready before he came on, and that was it really. Change the game and hopefully get the 3 points. I'm happy to be in the plans. I'm happy to keep moving forward with the team. Hopefully we keep winning and we can go on from here. I'm looking forward. I've just got to stay ready and be ready for whenever I'm called upon, like today. So yeah, all the right words, great stuff, and a really good performance to boot as well. I was very impressed with him. The other game changers from the bench were, like I say, were Decky and Maddison. Kulusevski's probably Spurs' best player of the season so far for me. I think he's been that good. He's just, all through pre-season he was superb, and he's come into this season absolutely kind of flying whenever he's been used as well. You kind of analyse, like, this is where I talk about stats, and you can kind of say he didn't actually touch the ball too much or play too many passes last night, but everything he did was very direct and important, and the touch, the controlling of the ball and then the touch off to Spence was just perfect, the nutmeg pass. And actually, I thought Maddison came on and did well in just getting a grip and control of the ball again and shifting it quickly for the forward for the attacking players, and the equaliser, the ball into Kulusevski was exactly like that. It was exactly that kind of ball that they needed. And actually, Mark Robbins said after the game that he thought Maddison was the one that changed the game in their favour. he was obviously coming back to his former club. And interestingly, Postecoglou had mentioned, he kind of referred to Kulusevski in one bit when he was talking about attacking players the day before in his press conference. He said, I think there's a massive upside in Kulusevski. I'm seeing more and more growth in him in that attacking midfield role. I definitely think there is a capacity to improve there in that area for sure, 100%. And then we had Brennan Johnson. That very clever, cute finish came at the end of a few days, which has obviously been tough for him. It hasn't been great. He played well against Newcastle, and then he's coming to North London Derby, and we know wasn't able to replicate that. And then, of course, you get the horrible people that come out of the woodwork and just abuse him on social media. He ended up deactivating his Instagram account because the thing with Instagram is that he'd already limited the comments on it a long time ago, so it's only people he follows. But that doesn't really stop you getting DMs because I don't have DMs open on Twitter because of just the sheer volume of, like, my notifications are insane, and it would be mad to get kind of messages. But you can't really do anything on Instagram. They go, even if it's people you don't follow or follow you, they go into like a separate folder, and you often get notifications for them. So occasionally you might have a little look at them. And I would imagine for someone like him, I'm on a way like bottom of the scale kind of thing when it comes to stuff like that. For someone like Brennan Johnson, if he clicks on some of those DMs, they're probably absolutely horrendous things. He was asked, Postecoglou, in the press conference the day before about, is that just become a part of life for footballers? They've got to deal with, because there's difference between criticism and just disgusting abuse and things you would never dare say to someone to their face. And he was asked about that, whether it is becoming just a bit of a norm. And he said, I hope not. I hate how we've just normalised all that stuff. I've been around long enough, and even when I was playing, I copped a fair bit, but it was usually on the terraces. And then the game was over and you'd go home. When people are at the game, they get a bit frustrated that you're not playing well. They give you some fairly direct feedback. I've had all of that. But you're talking about a young guy who's probably lacking a bit of confidence at the moment. Things haven't gone his way, but he comes here every day. He's working his backside off. He's asking for feedback. He's doing everything right. He's trying so hard to become the player he wants to be. It's hurting him a lot. It's not like he's out on the town, he doesn't care, and he rolls up late. So what's his crime? His crime is he isn't performing at the level that people expect of him. As a professional footballer, you've got to expect you're going to get criticism about that. That's part of your growth. He's still a young player, and I think there's so much more of Brennan that we're going to bring out in him. It's sad for me that we've kind of normalised that stuff, that getting abuse. And it is abuse, and a lot of it is personal. It's oh, well, that's part of the territory. I don't see that. I don't cop it anymore. If someone is abusive to me, they're going to hear it back. I don't believe that's right. I'll take criticism because that's my role, and scrutiny. You have to because that's your role. But I don't have time for abuse. I feel sorry for the young people today. They're on their social media platforms. I can switch off, and my one follower doesn't get upset by it. Does that mean he has a burner account? I don't think so. For the young players, for the young guys today, it's part of their world. They seem to get some sort of enjoyment from it. I don't understand it, but they do. The fact that they've got to limit their world, close their world a little bit because of, what kind of person writes abusive things to an individual? Criticism is one thing. As exasperation at a game, you accept that. But to sit down and write something abusive anonymously, say it in front of me. You'll get a punch on the nose. You won't do it again, mate. But they won't do that. They'll hide behind this. I hate that it's normalised, but unfortunately that's the world we live in. When I look at Brennan, I see a young man who's trying his hardest to be the best he can be. It doesn't always guarantee success, and it's part of his journey how he deals with all this. But he's a great kid, a great footballer, and I'm very optimistic about what he's going to do for us. So Johnson replied with the goal. It was a lovely goal. His celebrations were very muted. I think, like I said, partly because the team it would have been a bit embarrassing to go wild about it, but also I'd imagine because of the abuse he's got as well. He spoke after the game to Sky, said it's obviously a great feeling to score, especially so late. Just to get into the next round, obviously penalties is like a toss of a coin, so getting a goal late was really beneficial. Hopefully this is a good confidence moment for him as well. He's, what's that, I was going to say a goal and assist. It wasn't technically, was it? Because it ended up being an own goal. But hopefully this is a little kind of spur for him, if you'll pardon the pun. And I asked Postecoglou afterwards about how important it was for both Brennan Johnson and Djed Spence to kind of be the match turners in terms of the goal scorers. And he said, yeah, both were really good. They made an impact when they came on. Look, it wasn't an easy night for us, as I said. Credit to Coventry. You know, a lot of guys getting first starts, but I really think there's some positives in there with Archie and Lucas and these guys getting significant game time for us. And Djed, as you said with Brennan, you know I spoke about it yesterday, that he comes in, works hard at his game, and when you're an attacking player, you're always getting measured against certain things. I said, if he can get through this period and just be positive and play like he can be a significant contributor to us, and credit to him, he got a good goal tonight. Yeah, no, I was really pleased with him. I wouldn't say he was like sensational up to the goal. He tried. I looked at you. We kind of saw, I think it was at half time, the positional maps, and he was trying to take this really high position up the pitch, which obviously was putting pressure on Gray, but he was trying to stay high up the pitch, whereas Werner's was like almost in his own half for much of the, or at least on the halfway line. And you could see the very two different ways they were trying to attack the game. And I would imagine the Johnson way is probably more what Postecoglou wants. But yeah, so we're just 5 games into the season. Spurs are down to bare bones now, especially with the wingers. You know, for Brentford, you could quite easily have Odegaard, Werner, Basuma, maybe Richarlison, and young Will Lancashire out injured. Yeah, it's, you know, there's a potential here. Also, there's just some Man City stuff. Yeah, so there you go. And I mean, the absences of all those players could really open the door for Sergio Reguilon's back on the bench last night. He likely to be on the bench against Brentford as well, with the club that he was on loan at last season. But also Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore has to come on that bench, which is a good thing, I think. Yeah, I mean, I felt sorry for Mikey Moore in that on any other script for last night, he comes on and he plays a part. But it just wasn't that kind of game. And it would have been a risk to put him on there as well. But now, hopefully, he gets more of an opportunity, maybe comes on at the weekend. And certainly in the Europa League games, probably going to start them. Unless... No, I think there's a high chance he starts them, because you've now really only got Sonny and Brennan Johnson as the two kind of main wingers there. Obviously, Decky can play there, but he's at the moment is being preferred to play in a deeper role and doing very well there. So you kind of then, Mikey Moore's like next man up, as it were, with Odegaard and Werner are both out. So it could be a real kind of one of those exciting moments where circumstances and fate give someone a chance. And we know how exciting and how talented he is. But obviously, whether the coaching staff there think he's ready and everything. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens for Mikey. But I really hope that's what happens for him. The answer to that, when I said about the way Tom phrased his question about making whether Postecoglou understood the fans. How do I put this? Worry about him changing 8 players, especially after saying that, you know, about the silverware and stuff like that. And he said, I've always tried to do what I think is the right thing, the best thing for us in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And you know that there's no guarantees with anything you do in football. But what I've always done is back my decisions in critical times to always do what I feel is best. And if it doesn't work out, I can live with that. But I'm certainly not going to jeopardise what we're trying to build here by doing something that's going to make me look like I'm in a safer position. So we were always going to play these guys because we've got Europe starting next week. The last thing I want to do is throw guys in out of necessity. We need to get game time, and tonight some key players for us got some good minutes, and that means that when we do need to make changes moving forward, they've already played and they're ready to go. So yeah, it was a gamble that is just about ended up working out because they won the game. Last year the game was on a knife edge. They lost on penalties. This year, it fell the right way this time. He knows there's loads of work to be done at Spurs, especially in that final third after the last couple of games. But maybe the nature of this last-gasp win kind of just shows that the relentless never give up football that he wants from them is actually, it's the way to get them results. And then the quick passing kind of aggressive style of playing, it brings them wins. You kind of only have to point to the 2 goals to show them what they needed to be doing. Look, this was an abomination of a performance. It was. There's no getting away from that. And in the final minutes, they did win a game that they should and normally would have lost. As I spoke about those games before where they've gone and done this, it was stealing of the highest order. It was like essentially the great Spurs robbery of Coventry. But it might just be the little stick of dynamite they needed to kind of make the whole season explode to life. Maybe we'll find out quite swiftly because the games are so quickly coming on. We'll find out very quickly against the Brentford how it works. But yeah, I hope that all the backing at the club remains behind him. It certainly has been up to this point, and like I said, I think if they would just suddenly go for another kind of a stopgap option, and there was any sense that they were kind of wavering or changing things yet again, honestly, it would be the most embarrassing thing. They've made some embarrassing decisions over the past anyway, especially when it comes to managerial ones. Just constantly chopping, changing directions and everything. That, yeah, if there was any sense that was to come for Postecoglou, I think if you don't at least give him 2 full seasons to try and put a rebuild through, I think you've absolutely just lost the plot. I'm not even going there. Let's see what the coming weeks bring, and hopefully any kind of nature of that is, there's no narrative that starts to appear of that. I really hope there doesn't, because he's had this at every club. I think he said this the other day that at Celtic he said they were doubting him after 2 games of a season, and they went on to win the double in that first season. And this one, it feels like after 4 or 5 games he started to get this season. And look, I know you can roll in last season if you want, but I do still think that was a very different squad, and yeah, they had a lot of problems last season, and it is a major rebuild. You're going to get inconsistent results. You're going to get problems and stuff. But yeah, it's crikey. If there were, I can't even get my head around that. I'm not even starting to think about throwing the blame on yet another manager. That would be just let's hope that it doesn't come to that narrative being the case again. But right, before I head off, I am going to do a little loan roundup. I think I said that in the last video. I was going to do a quick one. Just rattling through them. I know I've already taken up too much of your time. Manor Solomon, as he's supposed to be pronounced. Obviously had a terrific debut for them a couple of weeks back. His second match was not so good. They played against Burnley. Unfortunately for him, he slipped on the ball in his own half. Burnley raced up the pitch and Luka Koleosho scored what would end up being the winning goal. Played pretty well other than that. Created a few chances for his teammates, but unfortunately that key moment was the big one for him. Brian Hill played Champions League football this week. 66 minutes in their 1-0 defeat at PSG. Had a tough day at the office. At the weekend they lost 4-1 to Barcelona and he was taken off at half-time. He had a massive chance in added time in the first half from about 6 yards out and he sent it straight to keeper. So not too great, but hey, playing Champions League football, good for him. Alejo Veliz, he's now made it 5 consecutive starts for Espanyol, which is great for him. He turned 21 today, I think it is. So happy birthday, Alejo. Not that he watches these anyway. Wasn't able to replicate his dramatic late goal-winning performance in the previous game. But yeah, he played 57 minutes. They beat Alaves 3-2. What was weird, though, was about his performance. He only touched the ball 8 times in the entire performance. We talk about Solanke in 24 and that not being much. 8 times is mad. That's you obviously want to be slightly more involved in the next game. Alfie Devine, he's at Westerlo now in Belgium. He made his debut on Saturday, came on at half-time. They drew 2-2 at Anderlecht. Luka Vuskovic scored one of the goals. Obviously, Luka Vuskovic, only 17, he'll be coming to Spurs next year. He scored 2 in his first 7 games. So, yep, that's a good good for those two, I think, to be playing alongside each other. Ashley Phillips had a little bit of a worrying moment of sorts. 41 minutes into Stoke's Carabao Cup penalty shootout win against Fleetwood Town. He came off because he'd done really well up to that point, from what I understand. He had some big headers, interceptions, but he took a Danny Mayer shot right in his face from close range, had to come off. I presume that's concussion related. Don't definitely know, but I presume it would be. He'd been an unused sub in the previous game, the 1-0 defeat they had against Oxford at the weekend in the Championship. He's got a new manager now as well. Steven Schumacher was sacked, and they've got Norwich coach Narcis Palak has come in, and he's taken over. So we'll see what that holds for Ashley Phillips in the weeks ahead. In that same game against Oxford, Dane Scarlett was yet again an unused sub. It has not worked out for him, that loan, thus far at all. Jamie Donnelly and Josh Keeley both played for Orient in midweek. You heard me mention about Donnelly at the start of this. They lost 3-1 with 10 men to Brentford in the Carabao Cup. Donnelly was really good, really busy presence, had a few shots, dangerous and set pieces. Like I said earlier, some really quick, clever, progressive passing. One really nice dribble he went on in the second half. Got to the byline, put it crossing, it went into the side netting, it was deflected. Did a lovely little nutmeg as well. It just had a really good game. And as I said, could have brought something for Spurs at Coventry, but also understand why he is on loan. He also did one wild, late, over-enthusiastic challenge that got him a yellow card. Josh Keeley made his debut, played the full 90, did really well. To come in there and play your first kind of Carabao Cup game, and did very well. It was a last moment for him after the final whistle. He went over to his family. I think it was his dad at the sideline, and shared a hug with him. It was very nice indeed. Matthew Craig was also in Carabao Cup action, playing for Barnsley. They were on the end of a very heavy 7-0 defeat at Man U on Tuesday at Old Trafford. He came on for the second half of that game. Also played an hour at the weekend. They lost 3-0 at Stevenage. He was taken off just before their second goal. George Abbott's doing really well. Back-to-back 90-minute displays and victories in League Two at Notts County. They won 4-2 at Bromley. Made a big impression. They've been really pleased with him there. Playing a defensive midfield role for them at the weekend. 3 tackles, 2 clearances, 1-on-1 dribble, touched the ball 52 times during the encounter, so he's doing very well. And Carrie Blodorn, the young 19-year-old goalkeeper, he's at Averley. He made his FA Cup debut at the weekend. They lost, unfortunately, 2-1 at home to Royston Town, who are one of the non-league teams I used to cover way back in the day. So they lost 2-1 to them. And he's just getting really great experience there, really pushing on for him as well, which is fantastic. So that's it really. I think that's everything we can probably talk about. We've got another press conference with Ange tomorrow. They're going to come thick and fast, these press conferences. He'll be discussing all things Brentford and probably a little bit more of the fallout from last night, and maybe definitely injury updates. We need to find out if Basuma is in contention at all. I wouldn't imagine you'd throw him straight in. You're probably going to keep playing Bentancur now as much as you can because of the potential of a ban coming up for him. To find out about Will Lancashire as well, whether he's any closer to coming back, because he could quite easily get a place on the bench. You'd imagine you'd probably put him there ahead of Reguilon. We'll find all that out tomorrow, and then we've got the match on Saturday, and I shall do the next video on Sunday. We'll discuss everything that happened on Saturday. Again, as to finish off as I have been recently, thanks again for the amazingly generous donations to my London Marathon fundraising efforts for cancer research. We're up to £16,000 now, which is mad. I haven't been doing it a couple of weeks. Still doing the runs, destroying my body right now. My hamstrings killing me, and the Postecoglou curse on my hamstrings as well. I'll pop the link into the comments and pin it in just in case anyone wants to continue. We've had, I think it's approaching 900 people have made donations. Incredibly generous, and people have been wonderful. It's such a great cause as well, so I can't really complain about wrecking my body for it. I don't think I put it in the comments last time, so I will. That'll be a regular thing. Sorry if anyone doesn't want to see that in the comments, but it's just such a great cause, and it's the one thing that I will always try to ask for and plug, because like I always say, I'm not the kind that asks for likes, subscriptions or subscribers or any of that. I can't even say it properly. But when it comes to something like this, I think it is something that I want to push, and I will continue to push over the months ahead. Right, time to head off. Hopefully a better performance overall on Saturday. That would be very nice, please, because I don't want to have to gouge my eyes out with spoons or anything. That would be great. time to head off. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.